Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringinAction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Teacher to Teacher podcast. I am your host, Carol Pelletier Radford, and I'm so happy to be part of the conversation with 2 very experienced educators today. The theme for Season 3 of Teacher to Teacher is based on the book that I wrote titled Teaching with Light, 10 Lessons for Finding Wisdom, Balance, and Inspiration. And each of the 10 episodes for this season mirror the 10 lessons in the book. So today's lesson is lesson 2, Bloom Where You're Planted. And I'd like to welcome our 2 guests, Vanessa and Tami. So let's begin by having you each introduce yourselves to our listening audience. So Vanessa, who are you?
Oh my God.
What are you doing? What's your current role in education? And tell us if your teaching experience.
Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I am a math therapist.
I love that.
So my current role in education is helping teachers heal their own math trauma and helping them help their students heal their math trauma. So I have a book coming out with Corwin. It's called Math Therapy. I have a podcast called Math Therapy where I speak to adults about their history with math trauma. And I have a tutoring center in Toronto where we tutor about 1,000 students a year and help them work through their negative relationships with math in order to heal one-on-one.
I love that, since I am one of those math students that had a lot of trauma around math all through school. And I wish that my teachers had this book and my own training it just brings it right back, like sweaty palms and the whole thing of being the student that couldn't do math, that I was not that student. So did you teach, Vanessa? What's your teaching background?
I taught in the grade 10 high school classroom for about 2 months of my life. I very quickly realized that wasn't the place, since we're talking about blooming where we're planted, that was not the place for me to bloom. I really don't like red tape. I don't like being able to not do things that I feel are aligned and authentically right for the student just because there are administrators in place or authority or anything that will let that happen. And I realized very quickly that my role was to work one-on-one with students in order to really cultivate a healing relationship with math. So
I'm so glad you found out early enough. And I'm sad in some ways because we don't want to lose teachers that are so energetic like you, but I love what you said. Like, you stayed in education. You didn't leave. You found that place to bloom, for you to bloom. And we'll talk more about that. Tami, please introduce yourself to our listeners and what's your current role?
Thanks, Carol. I'm Tami Dufault-Toomb. I work out in Oregon at a regional office, the Lynn Benton Lincoln ESD, and I co-lead a new teacher mentor program. And my colleague Cindy Jordan and I work together to support the mentors in our region. So we have 12 districts, and this is our 3rd year. We started the program from scratch with the help of Carol, by the way.
Thank you for that acknowledgement and shout out. I love working with you. And did you teach? What was your teaching experience?
I did. I taught for 26 years at the elementary level, grades K through 5. And, I've been really fortunate in my career to get to do a lot of different things, which I think led to the longevity. This is my 40th year coming up. And so I taught for 26 years, and Then I moved into a literacy specialist role and became a mentor and an instructional coach, and now into my new role.
Right, the new role. So you both bring, so this podcast is teacher to teacher, and I love bringing two teachers together who have very different experiences. But the goal of this conversation is to share our wisdom and have our listeners listen to see what fits for them and what they can take away that they can use. But I always like to start with a story, and the lesson is bloom where you're planted. And I ask listeners, like, well, what does that mean to you? I know what it means to me. I wrote about it in Teaching with Light. But Vanessa, share what that means to you, bloom where you're planted, and a story from your past or present that has us understand what you learned or pivotal moment that can help us understand how you've grown over the years.
I think, when you say bloom where you're planted, it's reminding me of a quote I heard the other day, which was, you can't control outcomes, but you can influence them. And I think in a lot of situations, we can't necessarily leave our environment. We can't control our environment. I will tell a story in a second about me as a student. I was in school. I couldn't exactly leave school, but as we grow up and as we become an adult and we get to know ourselves better and we learn what our coping tools are and what resources are available to us, it really helps us navigate situations in which we can't necessarily change the external circumstances, but instead we can use our own strength and resilience to literally bloom in a circumstance that might seem adverse at the time, but ends up being so healing for us, because what challenges us often is what leads to real growth and change. So that's kind of what I think of. And I guess the story I always default to is when I was a student in grade 11, I hated math, and I just wanted to be a rock star and marry Keanu Reeves, which I still, as everyone knows, if you know, still my goal to this day. I'm just waiting for that phone call. And I was always told that I wasn't a math person. People who looked like me didn't do math. People who talked like me didn't do math. No one really tried to support me. I went to a very academic high school, and my teachers were just kind of like waiting for me to get out of their classrooms. So I failed once, I failed twice, and then I did grade 11 math in summer school the third time, and I ended up with a 57. And my parents were like, oh my God, you're going to fail out of school and I don't know what's going to happen to you. So they sent me to what was called an alternative school back then. And it was in an office building with 100 kids. And we took elevators to class, as I said, and we called teachers by their first names. And it was such a different vibe because we had nothing in common except that all of us were labeled misfits and no one believed in us. So it was a really cool experience because we were in this building where the only adults in many of our lives who had ever believed in us were the teachers in that school. They were right. They were kind of it's not that you can't learn, and it's not that you're not smart enough for the traditional way of learning. It's that you need and deserve a different approach to learning. So I walked into my grade 12 math class and I said to my teacher, Eva, who I'm still best friends with to this day, I said, you're going to have a lot of trouble with me. I'm not a math person. And she was like, what? And I was like, I'm not a math person. And she just looked at me and said the words that changed my life, which were, that's not a thing. And
love it.
Then she told me to stop disrupting the class and to sit down.
Yes.
I ended up with a 98 in grade 12 math.
I love it.
Yeah. And it was just, that's obviously way before I went to teachers college, but I think in that moment, that changed my entire life.
That's a pivotal moment for that teacher actually saying that to you and believing it, and not just say and believing it. And that's what I hear in you that changed it. And now look at you. As I read your description, the Lady Gaga of math. So this math therapy and this book is the exact opposite of how you felt when you were a student. So congratulations and yay. Everybody's like, oh, I want to have that experience. Tami, so what is bloom where you're planted? When you heard that, what does that mean to you, and how does that apply to you? What's going on with you, your story?
Well, first of all, Vanessa, I am completely inspired by your story. I want to believe that in the 26 years in the classroom that I did that for my students, that they felt that way and felt that they belonged and that they were connected and that they had the ability, that I believed in them to be able to do what you were talking about. As I mentioned earlier, I have done a lot of things in education, and I think one of the biggest moves I made was 3 years ago, moving from what would be the traditional school district setting into a regional setting. And it was like going to a foreign country. I had to learn a new language. I had to learn a new structure and system and people. And I realized, you know what? You've done this so many times, Tami. It doesn't matter if you're in a new school, you're in a new district, wherever you go. For me to bloom, I have to find the people who share the same passion and purpose that I do, because those are the people that keep me going when things are hard. And one of those people was Carol, coincidentally, because I was starting a mentoring program from scratch. And so I reached out to everybody and anybody. I always go in with the premise that I have something to learn. And I look for those people who have done the work and have something to share. And then I try to take it and apply it to my context. And so blooming is really me taking some responsibility, right, to create some conditions that I know are going to help me be successful. I know that I am someone who operates best when I have a lot of autonomy. So this was a perfect match for me. I got to have a blank slate and say, create something. And that provided a need for me. I also work with an incredible group of people that are super supportive and are constantly, we're looking for ways to connect our work in order to support our districts at a high level. And I think having that kind of collaboration can really be incredibly supportive when you talk about those conditions, right, to thrive. Feeling like you're alone. And I think I kind of connected with Vanessa on that, maybe feeling a sense of loneliness in that high, academic school and not feeling as successful as peers. I think that can really lead to not feeling valued, not feeling appreciated, to feel like you can't do something because there's no one there to support you. And that's really what has drawn me to mentoring, to really help provide the support for mentors in our region to keep that from happening for our novice teachers. They're not in their classrooms by themselves crying at their desks every day. We don't want them quitting. We don't want them feeling like this isn't something they can do.
So a pivotal moment when you transition to this bigger organization, if you will, with 12 districts. Was there a moment when you felt that confidence shift? I know you reached out and got help, and what happened when you went, you know what, I can do this? Or because it's a different kind of leadership beyond our own classroom with the students, and then in a school with your colleagues. It's always about the adults. I would always say, I have no problem teaching the kids. It's the adults that are driving me crazy. And those are our colleagues. And I can hear the listeners laughing because people relate to that. But what challenge did you overcome? I guess that resilient piece to feel like a leader designing your own program. What happened?
I think one strength that I have is that I'm willing to just dive in, and I kind of fake it till I make it, so to speak. I just keep going until I feel like, okay, I think I have this. And so I'm a learner. Like I just, when you talk about quotes, the one that inspires me, and it's in my office, who dares to teach must never cease to learn. So I read a copious amount of books. I went to a lot of trainings. I networked with other people. And with every new thing I was learning, my confidence was growing. But I think the most powerful thing we did for our program was empathy interviews with new teachers and teachers of color. Because when you when you think about how do we invite everybody to be successful, we have to consider who the everybody, right, are and or is. And so those were profound for me, hearing the voices of new teachers and what's hard for them and what really keeps them from being successful. What are those barriers? I felt confident in the design of our program because the program was built using the information from the people it would impact the most.
Love it. Love it. So I hope the listeners are taking this in. This is a practical way. We just asked the new teachers. Now, so Vanessa, what do you think about that? Would that have made a difference in your 2 months if there was a mentoring program? And maybe it wouldn't have, but like what are you hearing that Tammy's saying that fits for you as a new teacher or a student? How are you hearing this?
Well, Tammy, I love all the work you're doing. I think it's amazing. And I'm like, empathy interviews. Wouldn't that be nice if we did that for our students? And I think a big thing that we're probably really aligned on is, and I guess it's interesting that it's so new, is Lisa McConchy, who is like one of my favorite people, brain-based learning expert, always says that a student's a student's emotional relationship with learning is foundational to their cognitive relationship with learning. And in what Tammy's saying, that's exactly it. It's like, I think we really for so long have neglected the emotional component of being a teacher, of being a student, of being in a relationship. We're constantly trying to develop like protocols and curriculum and content and like all of this, but there's nothing as powerful as how someone is feeling. There's nothing as real as that, and no amount of no amount of anything ever will detract from that. So thinking about, I don't really think this applies to me as a teacher. Honestly, for me, I really just felt misaligned with my purpose. I was like, my role is not in the classroom. I really think it's important for all of us to realize that we all have a role when it comes to helping our students thrive and develop into the amazing humans they're meant to be. And my role was something else. And I just felt that misalignment like in my literal soul. So I don't think there was nothing wrong. I was just like, this is not what I meant to do. I meant to do something else. But I think just as to what Tammy's saying, I think it's so amazing you're doing that work. And some might say you're like the Brene Brown of education.
Yes, thank you, Lady Gaga, for
writing
that. Yes,
for real. I mean, Brene's always talking about vulnerability and how do we actually bring that out? Because when new teachers are scared to be vulnerable and to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need help, what they're going to do instead is going to their trauma responsive flight or freeze and get out of there, and to prevent that, we need to embrace that. So
thank you. Thank you. So for our listeners, I would invite you to reflect on what Bloom Where You're Planted means to you. And for homework, I guess, think about what your creative gifts are. Where are you aligned? Sometimes we can't leave and we can't move, and sometimes we can. So we have to make that decision. Is this a time I should leave? I've taught for 2 months. I'm not aligned. Or is this a time that I stay and I find the conditions and I find the mentors and the people that can help me? That's the question. And I think we all have to look at what our gifts and passions are and what helps us thrive. But it starts with us. Like we have to do that. My story is going to, there's going to be a link in the description for this podcast. My story is called The Year After the School Burned Down. And I wrote about being on a sabbatical and coming back during my sabbatical. The entire school burned to the ground. And I was an elementary teacher. In my classroom, I lost everything. All the elementary teachers are gasping, all the stuff we have. And what I did to overcome it, and you know what? It was the most powerful teaching year I ever had because I learned how to teach with nothing. And that's that relationship. So if you want to hear my story, it's in the description with the link. So let's move on. Another question that I have for both of you relates to what teachers, our listeners, can do. Like, what's practical? We always want to apply, we want to learn, but then I want to take something that I can actually use in my classroom. or in my well-being or so and so. So Vanessa, you are an author, you have so much going on, you have podcasts. Can share a little bit about your therapy book, which I'm dying to read, and what you're doing. Like, what's practical that our listeners could actually do?
I know we all want practical things to do in the classroom, and it's a double-edged sword because at the same time we have no time to actually do anything else. So math therapy is really about the emotional component we're talking about. It is about diving into the feelings and past traumas that are showing up in your students who are in front of you, and that are also probably showing up for you as an educator, regardless of whether you teach math or not. I really believe that all of us have micro trauma when it comes to math and school in general. So I think if I'm going to offer practical advice at this moment, I'm not going to give us an activity to do, and I'm not going to be like, download this resource. I think my call to action would be that the only way we can truly see our students and understand what they need is if we truly see ourselves and understand what we need. And I think one of the most powerful things we can do as educators, and this is work I'm constantly trying to do and finding very, very difficult, is to understand what our past traumas and triggers are that we're bringing, like, I'll say into the classroom, but really into our lives. You know, we have all been through so much as adults, and often the lens through which we view our students, or the lens through which we view ourselves as teachers comes from that past trauma, and we're unable to see creatively and clearly because we're seeing out of fear of repeating those patterns, out of fear of passing our anxieties onto our students, which prevents us from taking risks in the classroom. Like, there's so much there. So I would actually say the best thing you could do if you wanted to be like, I'm going to go do something right now, is I would write out I call it in math therapy, I call it your math story. But if you don't want to do that, I would write out your school story. Who are you as a student or teacher, and how did you get to where you are? So I would just free write, set a timer for 10 minutes, write that out. My name is Vanessa and I teach blah, blah, blah. The way I got into teaching was blah, blah, blah. This is how I felt as a student. I want you to write that all out, and then I want you to look at it and see how much of that is an objective truth and how much of that is you being mean to yourself, you making excuses for your achievements and not necessarily highlighting your accomplishments. It's so interesting to read our stories once they're written out. I heard a brain scientist talk about how we think 90,000 thoughts a day, and only 10% of those are new thoughts. So 81,000 thoughts that go through our head are just repeated narratives that we've been telling ourselves forever and ever. So I would say, to make this brief, write out your story and take a long, hard look at it, and so you can see what you've been telling yourself every single day and see if you might want to make adjustments to them. And it's a great place to start, because until we celebrate how far we've come, it's really hard for us to feel confident and empowered in the classroom. And it's actually really hard for us to celebrate how far our students have likely come in their journey.
Thank you for that. I think what you're saying is so important, Vanessa, because it underlies everything we do in the classroom or in the mentoring programs. And it is that foundational piece that we don't articulate it. And you did that so well. It's not about the content, it's how our relationship to whatever we're doing. And I'm so happy to have you relate it that teachers and students are the same. I mean, we're all learners, we're all students. As Tami said, she had to be a student to learn how to be a leader. So thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. What do you want to share that people can bring into their work lives, or however we want to say, about the human condition? What makes sense for you in this conversation?
First of all, Vanessa, I am relishing that you're going first because typically I'm that person who gets called on. So this has been incredible for me. Um, and again, so inspired by you. I was just considering some work that we did last year and really understanding, like preparing before we go in to maybe conduct some difficult conversations, mentoring conversations. And Carol actually in her mentoring in action book has a mindful mentoring, like how you approach dilemmas. And we talk about the assumptions and biases that you walk into a mentoring conversation with. And it makes me consider what you were saying, like what were those traumas? Like what was your own school experience or your own teaching experience that is creating maybe an emotional response to something that you've seen in a classroom or that you're concerned about, and unpacking those before you actually go in to talk to a new teacher about how you can navigate that tricky situation. And so I appreciated you saying that. I think for me, there's a couple things. It's one, being aware of how I'm showing up, right? Like, what am I bringing in? Am I self-regulated in the moment? Am I having a bad day? Or what kind of energy am I giving off? Like, I need to be in a good place if I'm going to support someone who is struggling. And I think the other is this idea of appreciation. And I just feel like educators do not get the appreciation, the applause that they deserve. And it can be really disheartening for them over time. And I was sharing earlier with some colleagues that I often, when I'm in a classroom, I leave a note of appreciation or encouragement. You talk about Brene Brown. People are willing to be vulnerable. I think you acknowledge that, and you also bring forward what's positive and good, because negativity bias is real. Like, we can identify something negative in a tenth of a second. It takes us 12 seconds to identify something positive. And so I know educators can be really hard on themselves. And so us understanding the impact we have because of our own assumptions and biases or trauma is one thing to consider, but also the impact we have by being the encouragers, by being the people who bring forward and bring to light what's good for teachers and students in our world.
Thank you. Thanks, Tami. You're both leaders in the fields and the roles that you have aligned yourself with on purpose, or maybe not so on purpose. In Tami's case, got invited to lead this program. So as leaders, and I struggle with this too, how do we fill our cup? How do we stay inspired? What do I turn to when I feel unstable or not sure that I can keep helping other people teach with light because I'm not feeling very light today, and acknowledging that. And sometimes it's just not a trauma, or it's a bad mood, or it's something happened. I know for me, I completed yoga teacher training, and that was very inspiring to me, and an intentional practice. But I've discovered these little mudras that you could do with your hands, and they only take like 2 minutes. And it created just a pause. It broke the cycle of whatever negativity I was seeing in the moment and shifted it. And I could do it with my hands. And I really find it helpful. And I use that technique all the time. So I'm going to go back to Tami. What do you do when you have to feel where do you turn? Is it music, art, a poem? Sometimes it's just like a little something that we need to do to keep us filled with the light or joy or whatever it is that we need to project when we're helping other people. So what shows up for you?
You know, Carol, I am so blessed in my life to be surrounded by encouragers. I have colleagues and friends and family who, um, when I need a lift, in fact, right before this podcast, I sent a message to one of my friends saying, I'm kind of freaking out right now. And, you know, they sent words of encouragement. And, I think that makes a big difference for me. I'm also, like I mentioned, a really passionate reader. And so I look to read people who inspire me. We talked about Brene Brown. We talked about it, and educators like Cornelius Minor, people who are doing work that really speaks to me. I do love quotes. I have a notebook full of quotes that I collect and use.
Do you have one for us? Do you have a quote?
I don't off the top of my head. I wish I was like Vanessa and could just remember them verbatim, but I really just am inspired by the people who are in this work and keep doing it. Like they believe and are hopeful and want to see change and are working every day to make that happen.
Thank you. Vanessa, your turn.
I feel like have learned a really hard lesson lately about, I know we all know the saying. I don't know if I'll remember the exact quote, but you know, how can you fill up someone else's cup if yours is empty? La la la. I feel that I've learned a really hard lesson over the past few years about how true that quote is. And I think that my inspiration has always been, I got into mindfulness and meditation about 10 years ago. And that's a lot of what math therapy is for me, because everything we're talking about here is, I personally think, stuff that we should be teaching our students, because I feel like it's so unfortunate that it is this late in life that I'm finally learning how to regulate my nervous system, learning that triggers are a real thing and can impact me physically. And when I'm impacted physically, I cannot give myself to like my work, all of these things. So for me, the most useful tools have been mindfulness, meditation, breath work. I love self-help. I will read any self-help book. Like,
love it, me too.
Go into it. Like, I just, yeah, like, you know, Tammy was saying, words of affirmation. In my book, I talk a lot about creating math formation. So like math affirmations for students,
love it.
Helping them find mantras, and like really, I think if any way you can connect to a higher purpose, whatever that means for you, like I'm not talking about like God or religion, like just literally, for me, that's been such a big thing. Like really like learning more about yoga, learning about all types of spirituality, connecting to alignment and the source and the universe and the planet, and like all of that combined. If I fall off of that for even like 3 days, I am not in alignment. Like I am dysregulated. And I think like, I just can't believe how little we talk about this or know about it. I feel it is one of the most unfortunate consequences of living in our world today, that we have gotten so far away from our connection to the planet that we are just untethered and not really in our bodies. So anyways, that's a whole other podcast.
Thank you. Yes, yes, let's do that one. All right, season 4. We have our theme for season 4. What you're both saying is so important. Again, it's back to that teaching with light, or acknowledging who we are, like your activity, Vanessa, of what's our story, and we can change our story anytime we want to. If we just look, though, we have to be grounded. So two influential authors in the Teaching with Light book that actually I highlighted, Vanessa will like, John Kabat-Zinn wrote a book, wherever you go, there you are. Mindfulness, meditation in everyday life. And it's groundbreaking. He's done so much at UMass Medical, and it's not woo-woo anymore. It's medical before you go into a surgery. But we need to integrate it into education. It's in medicine that I think your book with the math therapy, you're doing great work, Vanessa, to integrate the human being into the math. that it's not about the content necessarily. It's that relationship that we build. And the same with you, Tammy. And the other book that John Kabat-Zinn was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh. So Thich Nhat Hanh's work, mindfulness and miracles of mindfulness and mindful eating and everything. So I'm glad you mentioned the mindfulness, and Tammy, you did too, with mindful teaching dilemmas, like mentors going in. That whole process was created after I completed yoga teacher training. I'm like, we need to have a protocol. You can't just jump in and judge what this other person's doing until we know what we're bringing to the conversation. So these are all inspirations for the three of us. So thank you for that. So we're winding down. I have two very short questions as we close. And I like to talk about change, our change in our thinking. I mean, education's changed, students have changed, everything. Change isn't necessarily bad, but we do need to acknowledge our shifts and what we see, our awareness. So, Vanessa, I used to think this about education, math, I don't know, actually. And now I think this. What is a shift that has come over you over these years, from being a math student that it wasn't your thing to being a math guru? What changed?
Okay, I think let me see if I can phrase this properly, but I think what I would say, and if you don't resonate, you can substitute the word school in for math. I used to think that math class was about learning math, but now I think it's about learning who we are and what we're capable of.
Ah, love it. Tammy, I used to think
mentoring was just being the friendly teacher next door who gave you the copier number.
that we can never get.
Mentors can play a big part in creating a dynamic new cadre of educators moving forward.
Yay, goosebumps from both of you. So let's end with some good news. I was totally inspired by John Krasinski's show during COVID, SGN, and it was some good news. So we don't take enough time to celebrate and acknowledge what's going on in your life, what you've noticed. What's some good news? Vanessa, what do you got?
Why do I have to go first for this one?
Oh, you don't want to go first? All right, Tammy, go first.
There's
a lot of pressure. This is so much pressure.
Vanessa, I'll go first.
Okay,
We're besties now, so she's mentoring.
She's mentoring. The mentor's modeling. Okay, good.
I think one of our biggest wins was we had, I think 80 people participate in our new teacher mentor program last year. And I think 2/3 of them are coming back for a second year.
Yay! It's all about retention.
And it's a commitment because we have to do it virtually in the evenings after work from 5 to 6:30, and it's several times a month. And I'm just so appreciative and grateful that people are willing to join us again.
Congratulations. That's all your leadership and your empathy interviews and all of that. All right, my dear.
Here's what we can celebrate. We can celebrate. We'll celebrate two things here. The first is that my new book is coming out. It's coming out on September 2nd, which is Keanu Reeves' birthday.
And my gosh.
The second part of that we're celebrating is that Keanu is turning 60 and is somehow hotter than he ever was in his life.
Oh my gosh. I love this. Bring the humor back. Bring it on. I think we as educators, we need that. So congratulations.
This is a fact. Go look up a picture of him right now.
Oh, I believe you. I believe you. It's all good. Well, I want to thank you both. This was a great conversation. Bloom where you planted. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to this Teacher to Teacher podcast. And I want to remind our listeners to stay inspired, stay healthy, and don't forget to share and celebrate your good news. So thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Tammy. It's awesome. And to our listeners, I hope you can join us on the next episode, which will be lesson 3. Be a lamp, not a mirror. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's teacher-to-teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free new teacher toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.